I was 17 when I first noticed it. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, those nights where you don't sleep, but you keep moving anyway, like a machine that's slowly falling apart. But the moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was walking down Willow Creek Avenue after school. The sun was low, painting long golden rays across the cracked pavement. I remember it so clearly because everything else faded. The cars, the voices, even the wind. I looked down, and my shadow was facing me. It had turned around. I froze. You ever get that feeling like your spine is holding its breath? Like your bones know something before your brain can accept it? That's what it felt like. I blinked, hard. The shadow hadn't moved. I whispered, "What the hell?" And then it stood up. I don't mean like it grew taller from the sun shifting. I mean it stood. That's when I dropped my backpack and ran. But here's the part one never told anyone. Not even the detective who came to our door a week later. I heard it follow me. Not footsteps. A dragging sound. Like skin scraping pavement. I didn't stop running until I got home. And even when I slammed the door shut and locked it, I didn't feel safe. Something inside me had shifted. Like a wire had snapped in the back of my mind. And now I couldn't trust what I saw anymore. And that was just the beginning. The first night, I told myself it was sleep paralysis. You know, those nightmares where your eyes open but your body doesn't move. But what happened that night, there's no medical term for that. No explanation. I was lying in bed, paralyzed, when I saw it again. The moonlight cast a sharp shadow on my bedroom floor, but it wasn't mine. It was someone else's, standing at the foot of my bed. Not moving, not breathing, just watching. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My chest burned. My arms ached to lift. And then the shadow crouched. Slowly, deliberately. I thought, God, please let this be a dream. But the shadow didn't care what I believed. It crept closer, inch by inch, until it disappeared under the bed. That's when I heard the whisper. A girl's voice, so faint I could barely understand the words. But the tone? It was weeping. She said, "It was supposed to be me." Then silence. For hours, I lay there shaking, until the sun rose and lit up the floor again. When I finally looked under the bed, there was nothing there. But I knew what I felt. I knew what I saw. And the next day, my best friend Talia didn't show up at school. They found her car abandoned just 10 minutes from my house. Driver's door wide open. Keys still in the ignition. Her phone was in the passenger seat, cracked. The last photo she took? It was of me, walking down Willow Creek. Alone. Except I wasn't. Behind me was that same dark silhouette. Only this time it had a face. And it wasn't mine. Why would she take a picture of me and not tell me? Why would she be following me? Why did her final words, sent in a voicemail I never listened to until days later, say, "Kara, don't look behind you. It follows the guilt." What guilt? What did she know? That I didn't. Or worse, what had I done that I couldn't remember? Because from that moment on, my reflection started to delay. My footsteps echoed twice. And when I turned a corner one evening on my way home, my shadow didn't follow. Kept walking, straight ahead. And I stayed frozen on the sidewalk, afraid to take another step. Afraid that I wasn't alone inside my own skin. Afraid that whatever followed me home that day wasn't a nightmare. It was a consequence. And someone was keeping score. The voicemail from Talia was 22 seconds long. And yet, it took me over an hour to press play. I stared at her name on my screen, Talia Vita, as if it might disappear if I blinked too fast. My thumb hovered over the play button, sweating. My chest was tight, every breath short, shallow. She'd never left me a voicemail before. We always sent voice notes or texts with emojis and those inside jokes no one else would understand. But this was different. This felt like a goodbye. I finally hit play. "Kara, please don't hate me. I didn't mean to follow you. I didn't know what else to do. You were walking alone. But your shadow wasn't yours anymore. It looked at me. Kara, whatever this is, it's not just following you. It's choosing. I think it chose me next. Don't look behind you. It follows guilt. Then static. Then silence. That was it. I wanted to believe she was wrong. That maybe she'd had some kind of breakdown. That the pressure of college applications and exams had finally cracked her. That maybe she got scared and ran away. But something inside me, deep primal, knew the truth. Talia was gone. And she wasn't the first. 3 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing my room, heart racing. Every window closed, but the air felt sharp, like breathing through glass shards. My curtains wouldn't stop moving. I shut them. I knew I did. At 2:17 a.m., I opened my laptop. Not to write an essay. Not to scroll through social media. I typed into the search bar, disappearance, Willow Creek, shadow, girl missing. I didn't expect to find anything. But then, the screen populated with something strange. A news article from exactly 12 years ago, June 18, 2013. A girl named Marley Devon, age 17, went missing while walking home from a local coffee shop. No witnesses, no signs of struggle, just gone. But here's what made my skin go cold. The photo the news used, it was grainy, faded, but I recognized the street. She had been walking down Willow Creek Avenue, the same block I walked every day. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, but there was a shadow. It didn't match her posture, didn't match the angle of the sun, didn't belong. I clicked deeper. Marley was last seen wearing a long denim jacket and black boots. Her backpack was found 2 blocks away, perfectly intact, just like Talia's. The police report listed no known enemies, no suspects, no clues. Case closed due to lack of evidence. But I couldn't let it go, because the day after Marley vanished, another girl had stepped forward. Anonymous. She claimed she saw Marley arguing with her own shadow. Of course, the article made it sound ridiculous. A local tabloid quote for shock value. But I couldn't ignore the overlap. Was Marley the first? Or just the first one we know about? And then it hit me, why would Talia say it follows guilt? What had Marley done? And what had I done? That made the shadow turn toward me. I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending this was paranoia. I couldn't keep locking my door and hoping the darkness outside wouldn't bleed through the cracks. I had to go back to where it started. The next morning, I lied to my parents. Told them I had to stay late for a project. Packed a flashlight, pepper spray, and the old journal Talia once gave me for my 16th birthday. She used to doodle in it during boring classes, hearts, lyrics, her favorite quotes. But the last page, I'd never seen it before. She had torn it out and shoved it in the back pocket. Written in red ink. She whispered to me in the woods. She said you were next. I didn't believe her. But I should have. Who was she? And how did Talia know about her? Before she disappeared. I walked to Willow Creek just before sunset. Everything looked normal. The cracked pavement. The bent lamppost. That old blue Ford someone had parked and never moved in months. But the air? The air was wrong. Still. Too still. Not a breeze. Not a bird. I turned my phone light on and looked around. Every step I took made my heart pound louder. And that's when I saw it. Something drawn on the sidewalk in chalk. A girl. A silhouette. Her arms reaching out. Her mouth open. Beneath it, someone had written, "I'm still here. Under the skin." I staggered back. My flashlight flickered. I turned fast. Instinct, and caught sight of my own shadow. Only this time, it didn't match. It wasn't holding a flashlight. It was holding a knife. I gasped. Dropped my phone. The light spiraled across the pavement, and for a split second, I saw her. A girl. Long denim jacket. Black boots. Face pale, trembling. Eyes full of something worse than fear, regret. And then, she was gone. But her shadow remained. And it was walking straight toward me. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. My chest ached. My legs burned. My heartbeat felt like it would explode in my ears. But I didn't stop. Not until I reached the edge of the woods behind Talia's old house. The place we used to sneak into when we were 12 and play hide and seek under the twisted oak trees. Only now, it felt like the woods were hiding something else. Something that wanted to be found. I collapsed onto the damp earth, clutching the phone I had nearly left behind. The flashlight had stopped working entirely. My fingers shook so hard, I could barely open the journal again. That torn-out page was still there. Talia's red ink. She whispered to me in the woods. She said you were next. The wind picked up, but the trees didn't move. And then I heard it. That voice. Faint, breathless, like someone pressing their lips against your ear but never touching you. Kara. I jolted upright, eyes wide, searching the trees. Who's there? Silence. Kara. This time it came from beneath me, from the ground. I scrambled to my feet and backed away from the spot where I had been sitting. My flashlight flickered back on for a brief second, illuminating the dirt. There were carvings, faint scratches, circles, crosses, and a name, Marley, scratched over and over until the wood of the root beneath had splintered. And beneath that, one sentence carved so deep, it looked like the earth itself had bled to spell it. She walks when you're not looking. It wasn't until the next morning that I dared to speak to someone about it. Not the police. Not my parents. I needed someone who believed. So I found her. Her name was Clara Jennings. She worked at the town library and was known for being the weird one. Always muttering to herself, never making eye contact. Forever buried in dusty books no one borrowed. But 12 years ago, Clara was a high school senior. She was also Marley Devon's cousin. When I approached her, she didn't even blink. You saw her, didn't you? She said before I could speak. I froze. What do you mean? She turned a brittle page of an old book. The girl in the shadow. She always comes to the ones who hide something. I didn't do anything, I whispered. I swear. Clara looked up, her eyes sunken, hollow. You don't have to do something, Kara. You just have to feel like you should've. She slid the book toward me. The page showed an old newspaper clipping from the 1970s. Teen girl found dead in basement. Shadow marks on floor, unexplainable. I read the name aloud. Helen Greer. Clara nodded slowly. She vanished for 3 days, then turned up dead. Her shadow was still on the wall, but her body wasn't touching it. I stared at her. What do you mean? I mean it stayed behind, like it refused to return to her, like it had a mind of its own. My breath caught. My voice cracked. What is this thing? Clara looked me straight in the eye. She's not a thing. She was a girl. A real girl once. I blinked. Who? Clara lowered her voice. A girl named Eve Malden. In 1956, she was accused of killing her little sister. They said she pushed her down the well behind their farmhouse. But Eve swore it wasn't her. What happened to her? I asked. They said her guilt drove her mad. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, and then one night, she ran into the woods, screaming that her shadow wouldn't lie down. I shivered. Clara leaned closer. They never found her body. Only a faint silhouette burned into the ground. The shadow of a girl with her hands covering her face. Later that night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to steady my hands. I forced myself to look at my reflection. Not just my face, my shadow. It didn't twitch, didn't blink, didn't move. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting. Waiting for something I hadn't admitted. Something I hadn't faced. And then, as I turned off the light to leave, I saw it. A second shadow behind me. Smaller. Closer. Hands raised. Like it was about to scream. I didn't sleep. Not even an hour. The next day, I returned to Clara. What does she want from me? Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked a question of her own. Do you remember the fight you and Talia had the week before she disappeared? I stiffened. How do you know about that? Because she came to me after it happened, Clara said. She said you blamed her for Marley. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. No, I whispered. That's not true. I said she was obsessed. That she was making it all up. But deep down, Clara said softly, you believed her, and you didn't help. My throat closed up. I remembered that night. The argument. Me yelling, stop trying to make someone else's tragedy about you, Talia. Her tears. Her silence. Her final words. She's not haunting me, Kara. She's hunting you. Clara gently placed something into my hands. A photo. Torn. Faded. Marley. Talia. And a third girl I didn't recognize. They were standing in front of the old well on Rose Hollow Farm. And drawn beneath them, scribbled in black ink, were 3 shadows. Only one had a face. And it was mine. I stared at the photo in Clara's hands like it was cursed. 3 girls standing in front of an old stone well, the kind you see in fairy tales, except this one was real. The stone was moss-covered. The wood frame was cracked and leaning, rotting beneath the weight of time. Marley on the left, smiling tightly. Talia in the middle, eyes downcast. And me on the right, the only one looking directly into the camera. But it wasn't just the photo that chilled me. It was what had been drawn across it in thick black ink. 3 shadows beneath our feet. Marley's shadow was jagged, like it had been torn. Talia's was smudged. But mine was sharp, defined. And it had a face. Not mine. Hers. The girl from my dreams. The one I saw under my bed. The one who whispered in my ear when I couldn't move. The one who stood behind me on Willow Creek Avenue. The face of Eve Malden. You were there. I asked Clara, my voice cracking. She nodded. I was the one who took the picture. Marley asked me to. I shook my head. But I don't remember that day. I don't remember even going to that place. Clara looked at me gently, like she was speaking to someone broken. That's because she doesn't want you to. Eve, Clara whispered. She hides your memories so you'll carry her guilt instead. I wanted to deny it, to say this was insane, but something inside me already knew. I had been to that well, and something had happened. That night I couldn't sit still. I kept walking around my room, touching things that felt unfamiliar. My books, my posters, my own handwriting in my school journal. Everything felt borrowed, as if I'd traded part of myself for something else and forgotten the exchange. At 1:03 a.m., I sat down in the center of my room and forced myself to remember. I stared at the photo, let the edges cut into my skin, let the ink stain my fingertips. 3 girls at the well. Why would we even go there? Then, like a dam cracked open, it all came flooding back. It was fall. Late October. The air had that bitter snap to it that makes your lungs sting. Talia had begged us to go. Just once, she said. It's where they say Eve Malden vanished. I want to see if the stories are true. Marley rolled her eyes. Come on, Tal. That stuff's ancient. Urban legends. I didn't say anything. I just followed. Because I didn't want to seem scared. Because I wanted to prove I didn't believe. Because a part of me did. We arrived at dusk. The well stood alone in the clearing, surrounded by trees that bent toward it like they were listening. The ground around it was dry, too dry for October. Talia pulled out her phone to take pictures. Marley circled the stones. I leaned over the edge and peered in. It was darker than I expected. No bottom, no echo, just a stillness that felt like it was looking back. Then Marley said something I'll never forget. You know, they say Eve screamed for hours, but no one could hear her. The guilt was louder, Talia added. And when her shadow came back, it wasn't alone. I laughed. Oh, come on. Are we really doing this? That's when Talia dared me. Say her name 3 times. Eve Malden. Do it. I did. But I didn't just say her name. I spit into the well and said, if you're down there, Eve, come prove it. I didn't mean it. I was just being a stupid teenager. I didn't believe in curses. But something believed in me. That night, when I got home, my reflection blinked before I did. And from then on, I started forgetting. Back in the present, I slammed my journal shut. The guilt hit me like a wave. I had called her, mocked her, summoned her. And now she had Talia. She had Marley. And maybe she wanted me next. Unless there was still a way to make it right. I texted Clara. Take me to the well. I remember now. I need to go back. The drive was silent. Her old car smelled like mold and lavender. And her radio crackled with static even though it was turned off. We parked just beyond the tree line and walked the rest of the way. The moon was full. But there were no shadows. Not mine. Not Clara's. The well stood there unchanged, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Clara stayed back. "You have to do this alone." I stepped forward. The wind began to rise, but only around me. The trees didn't move. The leaves didn't rustle. But the hair on my arms lifted like I was standing beneath a storm. I leaned over the well. Whispers climbed up the shaft like smoke. Talia's voice, Marley's, even my own, screaming, pleading, echoes of memories I'd buried and ones I hadn't lived yet. I shouted, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. Please, take it back. Let them go." And that's when she rose. A figure, crawling up the inside of the well. No ropes, no ladder, just fingers clawing through stone, skinless and wet, dragging herself upward. She stopped just below the lip. I couldn't see her eyes, but I felt them burning through me. Then she spoke. "You called me. You mocked me. You broke the seal." I was shaking. "I didn't know." "You knew enough to laugh." She lifted a hand. A skeletal finger pointed behind me. I turned. And there, standing between the trees, were their shadows. Talia's, Marley's, Helen's, frozen, hollow, waiting. I turned back to Eve. "What do you want from me?" She reached up. Her finger tapped the center of my forehead. "You already gave it." Then she vanished. Clara rushed to me as I stumbled back, breathless, barely standing. And as the sun began to rise, I saw it. My shadow. It was back. But it didn't match me anymore. It was crying. And its mouth was whispering her name. The sunlight felt strange on my skin. Not warm, sharp, like it was exposing something I hadn't noticed until now. We were standing at the edge of the clearing. Clara kept asking me if I was okay, but I could barely hear her. My ears were ringing. My hands tingled like they didn't belong to me. And my shadow, it was weeping. I watched it stretch out on the grass, trembling, its shoulders heaving, its hands pressed over its face. But I wasn't crying. It was. Clara's voice cut through the fog. "Kara, look at me." I turned. She saw it too. Her lips parted, her eyes wide with something close to dread. "That's not normal." No, it wasn't. Shadows aren't supposed to move without you. They don't cry, don't cover their faces like they're mourning something. But mine was, and I could feel it pulling on something inside me. Not my body, but deeper. Something emotional. A wound I hadn't touched in years. I said quietly, "What did she mean?" "I already gave it." Clara's voice shook. "You gave her access. When you said her name, when you mocked her pain, when you summoned her to prove a point. You gave her your voice. Your story. Your shadow." I whispered, "But I didn't mean it." "She doesn't care about your intentions," Clara said. "She only cares that someone finally remembered her." Later that day, Clara took me somewhere I hadn't been since I was 8 years old. The county archives. We snuck in through the back. She had a key, don't ask me how. She said she used to volunteer there during college. Said there were files no one wanted to touch. Stories that got too strange, too sad, too shameful. We passed shelf after shelf of records until she stopped in front of a drawer labeled Historical Misc. She pulled out a dusty beige folder and opened it slowly. Inside were unreleased crime scene photos. The first was of Helen Greer, the girl from 1976. The girl whose shadow refused to return to her. In the photo, Helen lay flat in a basement. Her body untouched. But her shadow? It was twisted on the wall. Arms raised. Mouth open. Screaming. The next image was worse. Eve Malden. Not her body, because that was never found. But a photo of the inside of her family's barn. On the wooden floor, scorched into the grain like someone branded it. A perfect human shadow. Hands over her ears. And beneath it, in shaky handwriting, "The guilt drowns louder than the screams." Clara handed me a folded map. "This is the original property line of Rose Hollow Farm," she said, "before it was divided and sold off." I looked at it. One spot was marked with red ink. Just beyond the well. A cellar. Long sealed. Never investigated. Clara whispered, "We need to dig." We waited until nightfall. Pack shovels, gloves, and bolt cutters. My hands were blistered before we even started. But I didn't care. The need to know was bigger than the fear now. The cellar doors were rusted shut, buried beneath decades of weeds and silence. Took us almost 2 hours to get them open. Inside, darkness. The air that poured out smelled like earth, mildew, and something rotted. Clara went first. Flashlight in one hand, her free hand trailing along the wall. I followed her down the steps. Each creak felt like it might be our last. The cellar was small. Stone walls, dirt floor, nothing on the shelves but cobwebs and dust. And then I saw it. The back wall. Scratches. Hundreds of them. Deep gouges into the stone. Like someone had tried to climb out. Or claw their way in. Clara said nothing. She stepped closer and held up the light. There were words carved over and over. I didn't push her. She slipped. Please believe me. She was screaming. And I couldn't stop her. And beneath it all, a single name. Talia. I stepped back. My knees buckled. What is this? Clara was frozen. Her flashlight trembling. These are new. What do you mean? I mean the scratches. They're not decades old. They're fresh. Someone's been down here. Recently. Then something groaned. From beneath the floorboards. We jumped back. Dirt began to shift. Clara raised her light, and I swear to God, something moved underneath, like a body, trying to reach the surface. She whispered, "Kara, we need to go." But I was already falling to my knees, my head pounding. The shadow on the wall behind me stood up. Not mine, hers. She rose from the stone like mist, slow and deliberate. Her limbs too long, her eyes too wide, her mouth stretched in a smile that didn't belong to the living. She spoke in Talia's voice, then Marley's, then mine. "I know what you did." I screamed. "I didn't kill anyone. You didn't stop it. I was a kid. I didn't understand." You laughed, and she stepped forward, her fingers raised. She pointed to the center of my chest, then whispered, "You carry what you mock. You become what you deny. And now you remember." The cellar shook. Dirt collapsed around us. Clara grabbed my hand, yanked me out just as the entire back wall caved in, burying whatever had just tried to crawl out. We didn't stop running until we were back in the car. I was breathless, shaking. And then Clara said something that terrified me more than anything I'd seen that night. "She's not done. She won't be until every name is spoken, until every story is known." I turned to her. "What story?" She stared at me. "The one you forgot. The girl who drowned while you watched and did nothing." There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels loaded, like a breath held too long, or a scream buried under water. That's what the drive home felt like. Clara didn't say another word. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly, I thought it might splinter. I stared out the window, but I wasn't really seeing anything. Just remembering, or trying to. Because somewhere in the farthest part of my mind, beneath years of locked doors and repressed whispers, something was waking up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with the lights off and watched my shadow crawl. Yes, crawl. It didn't mirror me anymore. It stretched and slithered, arching upward like smoke caught in reverse. Sometimes it stood behind me. Sometimes it sat. Once it curled into the fetal position and rocked. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Because deep down, I was afraid if I did, I wouldn't be the one controlling it anymore. Around 4 a.m., I opened my old memory box. The one I hadn't touched since middle school. It was filled with old movie stubs, broken friendship bracelets, a single cassette tape from my dad's Walkman, and a Polaroid of 4 girls. Not 3. Me, Talia, Marley, and a 4th girl with bright red hair and a face that felt familiar but had no name in my mind. I flipped the photo over. Written in childish scrawl, "Summer at Crystal Lake. Don't tell Mom." Crystal Lake. The summer camp. The lake. It hit me like cold water. Not a metaphor. Not a dream. A memory. Of a girl in the lake. Of someone screaming. Of me standing on the dock. Frozen. Talia yelling, "Help her!" Marley crying, She can't swim. And me? I just stood there. I don't remember why. I only remember the sound. The way her head dipped under once, twice, then didn't come back up. I remember the way the sun reflected off the water like glass breaking. And then silence. No rescue. No adult. No call for help. Just silence. And fear. Because the three of us made a pact that day. We never speak of this again. We buried it. We erased her name. We tore her from every photo. We swore she never existed. And I didn't just forget her. I let her drown twice, once in the water and again in memory. The next day, I confronted Clara. Her name, I said. What was her name? Clara nodded slowly, already knowing. She handed me a file. It was old, yellowed, from an incident at Crystal Lake Summer Camp dated July 8, 2011. Name, Evelyn Rose Malden. Age 11. Status, declared missing, presumed drowned. Body never recovered. Witnesses, none confirmed. Incident deemed accidental. My chest tightened. I thought Eve Malden was the girl from the 50s. Clara's voice was almost a whisper. She was. But this girl, your friend, was named after her. Evelyn Rose was her great-niece. I staggered back. That can't be. Clara shook her head. She wasn't just a random girl. She was tied to Eve by blood. And maybe by something deeper. Something darker. I clutched the file to my chest. I saw her drown. I let her drown. Clara looked at me, and for once, there was no judgment in her face. Only understanding. You were a child. But guilt doesn't care about age. That's why she came to you. That's why she's been waking up inside your shadow. Because you erased her. That night, I heard the lake in my dreams. Heard the splash. Heard her voice. You promised not to tell. I woke up at 3:33 a.m., drenched in sweat. My shadow was standing in the corner of my room. Arms limp at its sides. Its head tilted unnaturally to the left. And its mouth? Moving. No sound. Just the motion. Over and over. I got up. Slowly. Moved toward it. When I stepped into the moonlight, it snapped back into place like a rubber band. Now it mirrored me again. But only on the surface. I knew what I had to do. I returned to Crystal Lake. Alone. The camp had been shut down for years. Overgrown, silent. The dock still stood, gray and warped, reaching into the black water like a hand in prayer. I walked to the end of it, sat down, let my feet dangle over the edge, and whispered, I remember now. The wind shifted, the trees creaked, the water stirred, and then I saw her, Evelyn, just beneath the surface, eyes open, hair drifting around her like seaweed. She didn't speak. She just stared. I leaned down. I'm sorry. She rose slowly, face breaking the surface, her lips trembling. You left me. I was afraid. You forgot me. I never meant to. You lied. And she reached up, not to pull me in, but to give something back. She placed her hand on my shadow. Not me, my shadow. And for the first time, it stopped crying. It just stood there, silent, still, whole. When I left the lake, I wasn't alone. Not in the way you think. Evelyn didn't follow me. Neither did Eve. But something had changed. My shadow was mine again. But deeper, heavier, wiser. Carried her name now. And her memory. And I would never forget her again. You'd think remembering would be the end. That facing the truth would lift the weight. That acknowledging the forgotten girl, the one who drowned while I stood frozen on the dock, would be enough. But the thing is, memory doesn't cleanse guilt. It awakens it. And the moment I left Crystal Lake, something changed. Not just in me, in the town. It started the next morning. The air felt different, charged like a thunderstorm building underground. I stepped outside and immediately noticed the shadows. They were longer than they should have been. People walked down the sidewalks, but their shadows didn't match their steps. One man's shadow lagged 3 strides behind him. A woman's flickered like a candle. And then I saw a little girl, no older than 8, standing with her mother at the bus stop. Her shadow wasn't hers. It was taller, older, His head was tilted up, staring straight at me. I ran to the library. Clara was already there, pacing, frantic. "You felt it too," she said. I nodded. "It's like something opened." Clara didn't hesitate. She pulled out a stack of old newspaper clippings she'd been collecting in secret. Stories no one in town talked about anymore. Girls. Missing. Drowned. Vanished in broad daylight. All different years. All different places. But every single case had one thing in common. No body. No shadow. "I thought it was just folklore," Clara whispered. "I thought Eve Malden was the beginning. But I was wrong." "What are you saying?" "She was just the first one we recorded. Not the first one it happened to." She pointed to a photo from 1924. A blurry image of 5 schoolgirls in front of a whitewashed church. Only 4 cast shadows. Then another from 1892. A teenage girl in a white dress standing beside a well. Her shadow is reaching away from her. Over and over again. Decades of forgotten girls. Erased from memory, from records, from stories. Until now. Until Evelyn Rose. Until me. That night, I walked into town square. The clock tower struck 9. And the lights went out. All of them. One by one. Every street lamp blinked off like someone was pulling a string. Stores closed early. Windows slammed shut. The air turned to ice. And then, they came. Shadows. Hundreds of them. Moving without bodies. Some floated. Some crawled. Some walked like puppets yanked by invisible threads. And in the middle of the square, beneath the dead lights and silent sky, they gathered around me. They weren't hostile. They were waiting. I stood still, my breath forming clouds in the freezing night. Then a voice, hers, spoke from the darkness. "You see us now." It was Evelyn's voice. But it wasn't just her. It was layered. Dozens. Hundreds. Girls speaking at once. Overlapping, like pages of stories turned too fast. "You remember one of us. That is the door. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "To be spoken. To be named. To be known." Each voice chimed in like a choir of grief. I whispered, "I don't know all your names." They stepped closer. Shadows that trembled like sorrow. "You know ours by what was done to us." One whispered, "I was drowned when I screamed." Another, "I was buried for being loud." Another, "I was erased when I saw too much." I felt tears fall. "I can't fix it." "No," they said in unison. "But you can tell it." The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's office with the file Clara gave me. Evelyn's file. I placed it on the counter. "I need to report a drowning. One that happened in 2011. The deputy blinked. "We don't have any active cases from that year." I slid the photo across the counter. "The one with 4 girls." She looked at it and frowned. "There's something wrong with this picture," she said slowly. "I don't recognize the 4th girl. She looks like..." Her voice cut off. Her face went pale. Behind her, her shadow twitched. That's when I realized. It wasn't just about the girls. It was about the silence that surrounded them. The adults who pretended not to see. The friends who made pacts of silence. The towns that buried stories deeper than their cemeteries. And now, the shadows were done waiting. I started documenting everything. I built a wall in my room. Photos, strings, names, places. I started a blog under a fake name. Started uploading the missing reports, the news clippings, the interviews. Each story brought back a name. Each name brought back a girl. And each time I posted, I'd hear Evelyn whisper in the static of my headphones. "Thank you. But there's something else now." A new voice. Deeper. Older. More angry. It came after I posted the case of Margaret Silvers. A girl who was institutionalized in 1903 for saying her reflection belonged to someone else. Her file was burned. Her death unlisted. Her grave empty. That night, I woke to my shadow sitting on my chest. It wasn't Evelyn. It wasn't mine. It was hers. The one who came before Evelyn. Before Eve. The original. And she whispered, "They opened the door." But I was already inside. They say some truths are like locked doors. and some are like wells. You don't just unlock them. You fall into them. You drown in them. That's what part 8 is. A fall. A descent. Straight into the origin of the thing that's been watching us long before any girl went missing. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, the same image returned. A girl standing in firelight, surrounded by ash and whispers. No name, no face, just a silhouette with a shadow that stretched like roots across the floor. And every time I woke up, she was closer. Not the shadow. Her. Clara found the clue. It came from the church records, the ones sealed since 1859. We had to sneak into the Historical Society's private basement. She picked the lock with a tension bar made from a paperclip and prayer. Inside, we found it. A black-bound ledger with curling gold letters on the spine. Read hollow founder's decree. The first few pages were formal land grants, building permits, laws about livestock and church bells. But then, tucked between 2 yellowed sheets, was a smaller journal. Handwritten. No title. Just a single phrase on the cover. She walked out of her shadow. It was written by the town's founding pastor, Reverend Ellison Wren. Dated November 3rd, 1797. Inside were entries, wild, desperate entries, about a girl named Adelain Merrow. According to the pastor, Adelain was 12 when she first separated. She told her mother that her shadow had become another girl, that it followed her differently, watched her sleep, spoke her name backwards. The town accused her of witchcraft. But the Reverend? He didn't deny it. He confirmed it. One entry read, "Her reflection blinks when she is still. Her shadow lingers when she has gone. The girl is not alone. She is splitting. And I believe she was born beneath a broken veil." Another entry, "The other girls whisper her name when she walks past. But when she speaks, their mouths shut like graves. Even their shadows cower from hers. I have watched them walk away from her." Then came the last entry. Just 4 words. She swallowed her echo. Below it, drawn in blood, was a crude sketch. A small girl curled on the floor. Her shadow stretched on the wall behind her. But it wasn't her shape anymore. It was taller, older, wearing a crown of ash. Beneath the drawing, the first whisper never ends. We left the archive shaken, quiet. Back at Clara's, we pinned everything to the wall. Evelyn, Helen, Margaret, Adelain. A century of missing girls. A lineage of silenced echoes. Each one carrying guilt, trauma, secrets. Each one trying to speak, but only being heard through shadows. That's when I asked, "What if it's not a curse?" Clara looked at me, confused. "Then what is it?" And I said what I hadn't dared speak until now. "What if it's a chain?" That night, I dreamed of Adelain. Not Evelyn. Not Eve. The first. She stood in a field of broken dolls and burned hymnals, her feet bare, her dress tattered. She looked at me with eyes like candlewicks, burnt black, still smoldering. "You carry what they buried," she said. "But you still sleep on top of the grave." Then she pointed behind me, and I turned to see the church, the old white church in Town Square, the one they'd rebuilt 4 times, the one no one was allowed to enter after dark. Adelain whispered. The silence began beneath the floor. I woke up gasping, and without hesitation, Clara and I went there. 2:14 a.m. She picked the back lock. Again. The church smelled like old books and wet stone. Everything was too quiet, like the air had forgotten how to move. At the front, the altar stood crooked, and beneath it, barely visible in the moonlight, was a trapdoor. We pried it open with a crowbar. The hinges screamed. The air that poured out was cold as bone. We climbed down into the dark. The floor was dirt, the walls rough stone. And there, on the far side of the room, was a circle of blackened handprints. Children's handprints. Dozens. All scorched into the stone like they'd been pressed there while burning. In the center of the room stood a broken cradle. Inside it, a doll. Its face cracked. Its eyes made of black glass. And stitched across its dress in crooked red thread. "Remember me." Clara backed away, whispering, "This isn't just history. This is a ritual. I nodded slowly, my voice hollow. This is where they put them. The girls. No. The stories. That's when the whispers began. Dozens. Hundreds. The walls trembled. Dust fell from the beams. And then, one by one, the handprints began to glow. Each one lighting up with a faint, red ember. Like breath returning to lungs that had waited centuries. The shadows returned. Formless. Forlorn. Forgotten. And in the middle of them she came forward. Adelain Merrow. Crowned in ash. Eyes like dying stars. A voice stitched from every girl who'd been lost, erased, or blamed. She looked at me not with anger, not even with sorrow, but with recognition. You're the first to carry us backward. I whispered, what do you want me to do? She touched her chest with one hand, then pointed to mine. Become the book they never wrote. And as she faded, the shadows did too, leaving only the doll behind. We sealed the trapdoor, but we didn't erase what we saw. The next day we started a new archive. Not on paper, not in town records, online, unfiltered. We called it the Whisper Ledger. Every girl, every name, every handprint, every silence undone. Because this isn't just a ghost story. It's a reckoning, and it's not over. You don't go viral when you want to. You go viral when you're not ready. It started with one post. A single black and white photo of 4 girls, 3 shadows. Caption: what happens when the shadow doesn't follow? Clara uploaded it. I begged her to post under an alias. She didn't. She said, if we're telling their stories, we tell them honestly. With names. With faces. With weight. I didn't realize the weight would be this heavy. Within hours, the page was flooded. Comments. Messages. Shares. But not just sympathy or curiosity. Confessions. People from towns we'd never heard of. People who remembered stories they weren't supposed to. People who dreamed of girls they couldn't name. A woman from Vermont wrote, when I was 13, I saw my best friend's shadow fall into the lake without her. She swore she saw someone waving from the bottom. They said she imagined it. I never spoke about it again. A man from Idaho posted, my sister drowned in 1993. There's a photo from her funeral. She's not in it, but her shadow is. Even teenagers wrote in, there's a place near our school where the trees won't cast shadows. It's shaped like a girl lying down. It didn't take long before the posts caught fire. Hashtag Whisper Ledger started trending. People wanted answers. But the town? They wanted silence. 2 days after the page went live, Clara and I were summoned to the mayor's office. He didn't ask us to sit, didn't smile. He simply closed the blinds, locked the door, and said, you don't understand what you're waking up. Clara crossed her arms. Maybe you should have thought of that before burying them alive in your records. His jaw twitched. Do you know how many families will be implicated if this continues? Judges, councilmen, reverends, historians. I stepped forward. Maybe they should have thought of that before ignoring their shadows. He snapped, slammed the desk. They weren't ignored. They were contained. What you're doing, this ledger, you're undoing the protection. I froze. Protection from what? He went quiet, then whispered, from the one that never had a name. That night we received an anonymous email. No subject line, just a link. It led to a digitized journal dated 1731, even older than the Reverend's ledger. It was written by a settler named Elsbeth Crane, and what she described wasn't just folklore. It was a warning. A child was born under a dead moon. No mother, no breath, but her shadow reached across the floor like it had been waiting. When she walked, the shadow turned first. It didn't like to follow. She smiled with teeth she hadn't grown. And when she slept, the trees leaned inward. We tried to bury her, but her shadow stayed behind. At the end of the journal was one line. If you forget her, she follows. If you remember, she consumes. I didn't sleep. Instead, I scrolled through the growing Whisper Ledger messages. One stood out. It was from an elderly man in a hospice home 2 towns over. He attached a photo. 2 little girls standing outside a red barn. One smiling, One serious. Only one shadow. His message. I was the last person to see them before they vanished. My daughter was one of them. Her friend's name was Kara. My blood ran cold. I stared at the photo again. It was me, but I didn't remember. Not the day, not the barn, not the girl, until I saw her eyes. Evelyn. But not Evelyn Rose. Older. Different. This girl was me too. A version of me I'd forgotten. A version of me they had tried to erase. I drove to the hospice facility the next morning. Alone. The man was waiting in a wheelchair by the window. His voice was frail, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't say hello. He said, "You weren't supposed to survive." I froze. "What do you mean?" He wheezed. "The girl who drowned wasn't Evelyn. She was a decoy. The real one, the one with the ancient echo, was you." I shook my head. "That's not possible. You were born during the silent hour," he rasped. "No cry, no shadow. They thought you were stillborn." But the nurse screamed, because the moment you exhaled, every light in the room went out. I stepped back. My ears were ringing. "I don't believe you." He nodded. "That's why they tried to replace your memory. That's why they buried Evelyn's story inside yours. You're not carrying the ledger, Kara. You are the ledger." I didn't drive home. I wandered. Through old streets. Past boarded-up playgrounds and abandoned wells. I ended up at the edge of town, where the train tracks disappear into the forest. And there, waiting beneath the moonlight, was my shadow. Not following. Not attached. Just standing. Facing me. It stepped closer. Then lifted its hand. And pointed to my chest. Just like Adelain did. Just like Evelyn. And then it whispered without sound. "You can tell the story. Or you can become the next one told." I stood there for a long time, letting the wind pass through me, letting the truth sit. I'm not just a girl haunted by someone else's shadow. I'm the girl who was never supposed to remember her own. But now I do, and the whisper is getting louder. There comes a moment when the truth stops knocking. It starts kicking in the door. That's what part 10 is. Not a discovery, not an unraveling, but a confrontation of what I am, of what they buried, and what can no longer stay underground. The morning after the encounter by the tracks, I stood in front of the mirror for hours, not to see myself, but to watch my shadow. It didn't move with me anymore. It watched me, mimicked me just enough to pretend. But I knew. It had learned to lie. Clara came over with 2 duffel bags and a folder marked, "Do not open until it's time." She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "It's spreading." The whisper ledger had crossed into local news, then radio, then national broadcasts. They were calling it hysteria, mass delusion, shadow syndrome. But the people writing in, they weren't delusional. They were remembering. A girl from Oregon said her little sister stopped casting a shadow the night she accused her stepfather of abuse. A woman in Georgia remembered her best friend disappearing during a hide-and-seek game, only to find her name erased from the yearbook the next day. A teacher in Kansas sent us a photo of a 4th-grade class where one child appeared in the group shadow, but not in the photo. The ledger had become more than stories. It had become a reckoning, and with each entry the shadows grew bolder. I asked Clara, "How does it end?" She opened the folder. Inside, an old, brittle letter, stamped with wax, signed in looping ink, A.M. Adelain Merrow. "If you find this, I am already inside you. I am not death. I am memory. I do not hunt. I remind. I will not stop until every girl who has vanished, silenced, or shadowed has been spoken." Beneath it, a single phrase carved in red ink. "Truth is the only burial we never survive." Later that day, I was invited to speak on a podcast. They wanted to hear the real story behind the whisper ledger. I should have said no, but I didn't, because I knew this wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to all of them. I sat in the recording booth with my hands trembling, and I told the story, all of it, from Evelyn to Adelain, from Crystal Lake to the shadow in the corner of my room, from silence to scream. And when I finished, the host asked, What do you want people to take from this? I didn't hesitate. I want them to ask who they've forgotten. That night, the ledger crashed. Too much traffic. Too many messages. The site went dark. For hours. And during that blackout, she came. It was 3:03 a.m. The walls groaned. The air dropped 20 degrees. And I knew, not felt, knew. She was here. The original. The whisper before names. The thing they built this town to contain. Not a ghost. Not a girl. The memory of every girl no one listened to. She stepped out of my closet. Smoke for skin. Eyes like bruised moons. And a voice like paper tearing. You told them. I nodded. You remember now. I nodded again. Then she said something that broke me. They know me now too. And they will not let me go. I backed away. What do you want? She didn't speak. She just opened her arms. And behind her 1,000 girls walked forward. Shadows in human shape. Girls of every age, every decade, every race, every name that never made it to a headline. They didn't want revenge. They didn't want blood. They wanted to be real again. One of them stepped forward. It was Evelyn. Not twisted. Not haunting. Just Evelyn. The one I remembered. The one I let drown. She smiled softly. You didn't let me die. You let me be buried. But now you're digging. Another girl followed. Helen. Then Margaret. Then the others. Until finally, Adelain. She touched my cheek. You are our voice now. But even voices can be buried if no one listens. Then she held out a box. Inside, a mirror. But not reflecting me. It reflected them. All of them. Their stories. Their screams. Their silence. I took it. And I promised. I will carry you. Even if it breaks me. The next morning, I found a shadow in the hallway that didn't belong to anyone in the house. It was dancing. Spinning slowly. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not in fear. In honor. Because I knew who it belonged to. All of them. The town tried to shut us down. But every time they erased a story, 5 more took its place. We started printing hard copies of the ledger. We sent them to schools, churches, courtrooms, correctional facilities. Each copy whispered, "We are still here." Now every night, I light a candle by my window, and sometimes, just sometimes, when the light flickers, I see a shadow that moves on its own. She never says anything. She doesn't have to, because now I know, we were never haunted. We were being asked to remember. And remembering, that's how the curse finally ends. Not with silence, but with story. If you want more chilling true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the Veil of Secrets.